This presentation was originally a workshop conducted at the Life Matters Worldwide Summit Conference in 2019. It was recorded at that time, but I kept wandering away from the microphone, so the audio is not particularly good. And I wanted a chance to edit it a little bit to kind of improve it. So this is, in some ways, the new and improved version of that workshop. Now that was interactive, and this is going to be more of just kind of a webinar session, so a little bit different. There was a worksheet that was provided, and you may want to click on that and to download it ahead of time here. You don't need to follow along with that, but it's good to have it in your hands. Anyway, so designing spaces that celebrate your mission. That's the topic here, and the idea is that we want the pregnancy care centers out there to fully understand environmental messaging and how they can be used to improve their mission. A little bit about myself. My name's Andy Mollison. I am an architect, been practicing for about 20 years, a member of the American Institute of Architects. I am also a member of the Knights of Columbus. So it gives me great pleasure to be able to participate in what I would call the spiritual battle that's taking place. Pregnancy care centers, of course, you're on the front lines of that battle, and we're here to support you. So hopefully you find this presentation to be very useful. The goals of this workshop are to help pregnancy care centers understand the importance of intentional messaging as well as unintentional messaging in their built environment. We want you to see your space as a four-dimensional billboard, one that has messages which unfold over time, so it's not just the three-dimensional spaces around you, but how that message is reinforced as people walk through your space. We also want to recognize simple ways to communicate your mission through architecture and interior design. So we want to help you understand how you can improve the message that your buildings are giving. So here's the outline of the workshop. First, we're going to give an overview of what environmental branding and messaging is. Then we're going to explain the process for applying these principles to your particular space. And we're going to view a ton of examples, both good and bad, of how those principles are applied. And then we'll give some final thoughts. We don't have really an opportunity to do questions and discussions, but I'll incorporate the questions that I received from the participants into this narrative. So buildings speak, whether we realize that or not. Even without words or pictures, the space that you see here in this image is telling a story. Hopefully when you walk into a space like this, you feel reverence, you feel awe, you feel inspired. Specifically chose a church without any real pictures and banners or messages, just to show how even the architecture itself can evoke a feeling inside of people and communicate a particular message. And while a pregnancy care center is not necessarily a church, I would argue that it should be treated somewhat of a sacred space when you consider what's going on inside there. Most of the workers that are there because they're answering a call to God. They're performing spiritual works of mercy. There is a holiness about these spaces. They're essentially dedicated to the service of God, because that's really what we're doing. We're not only saving lives, in essence, we're saving souls, in some cases more than one. So we should treat our spaces with this certain sense that there is this higher calling within them, and we should give them the dignity that they deserve. Along with that sacredness, there is a brand that you're representing. And I want to talk for a minute about the power of brand. It's not necessarily what you want people to think about you, but it's what they actually are thinking about you, which is why companies spend millions of dollars trying to reinforce their brand, because they're trying to influence you to have a certain perception when you see their logo somewhere. So it goes a lot deeper than a logo, but that's just kind of like the starting point. From there it builds, and that's what you want to be doing within your pregnancy care center. You want to build on that concept that your logo represents. So here's an example. One of the most recognized brands in the world is Coca-Cola. So here we have something going on outside the front door. And you can see that there's a lot of elements here which are basically reinforcing the Coca-Cola experience, right? Number one, the red is always the same. You can see it all over, from the sign the girl's holding to the t-shirt on the bear to even the ticket window signs in the back have that same red. Her scarf, it's all very consistent. It reinforces it. You know that you are in the Coca-Cola world when you step in here, and it's not because everything is painted red. But things are consistent, from the Coca-Cola script on the bottle to what's written above the awning overhead. Everything's coordinated. Everything is orchestrated. It's not overdone. It's like I said, it's not all painted red, but what elements are there where they want you to see it they're reinforcing the message that they're trying to get, this familiarity that they want you to have with their particular brand. Now, to be effective at this, we have to develop a style guide. If you don't have one now, you should assemble one. So what a style guide does is it tells everybody how to apply your brand, where to use the colors, what are the colors, what are the Pantone varieties of the color. There's actual numbers that you can assign to every color essentially in the spectrum. What fonts should you be using? When should you be using them? What size? You don't have to go into depth as what you're seeing here, but this is just like a one-page example. I mean, there's companies that have books on what their style should look like, but there's some things that you probably already have. When to use the logo. You can kind of pull that together maybe in an 8.5 by 11 so that whoever's providing information, whether it's the receptionist, whether it's your marketing consultant, whether it's just even counselors, people should just be aware of the fact that that brand was intentionally created, that that logo, that graphic, that the slogans, that the mottos, all that stuff was crafted by somebody. You put it in one place and it makes it easier for people to help reinforce that as they're doing the mission within the space. Because it's all essentially about intentionality, right? We're trying to craft the message. This is a favorite quote of architects by Winston Churchill. We shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us. Well, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to infuse the message into the environmental space so that everybody who comes into that space is then influenced by that message. This isn't all that subjective either. In many cases, environmental impact on human performance can be measured. A lot of research has gone into this field recently. For example, recently we've discovered that blue light actually improves task performance during the day, whereas it hinders your ability to sleep at night. This reflects our circadian rhythms and the amount of blue light that sunlight provides filtering through our atmosphere, and you can actually measure this, and people have. We know workforce productivity in office tends to drop when the temperature is too low. This has been done by measuring typing rates and the number of errors and typos that are made, and when you drop the thermostat down, people make more typing mistakes. We know that red causes people generally to overestimate the passage of time, whereas if they're in a green room, they tend to underestimate how much time has elapsed, which is why the waiting rooms often sometimes are called green rooms. The other thing that green can do for us is when we need to kind of recharge our mental capacities, green helps us do that. So if you have a group of people that need to take a break from a lot of focused effort, you want to put them in a room full of plants. You want them to kind of view foliage if possible, and that kind of helps them somewhat be rejuvenated and get back to the task and continue to perform at a high level. And on that note, here's a lush green scene for us to kind of restore our minds as we head into the next section here. So we're going to now talk specifically about how you can apply these principles into your particular PCC. Okay, so here's the homework assignment that I had given out at our workshop, and the intention was for PCCs to go back and actually go through this process in order to help improve their environmental messaging. So this is where the worksheets came in as well, although you don't necessarily need those because these are the steps that are on the worksheet. But real quickly, the overview, the assignment was this: gather a team. Don't try to do this on your own. Define your typical personas. This is a marketing term for the audience, the people that you're trying to communicate your message to. Get a floor plan of your current facility. Gather up some tools to help you in your analysis. Conduct a walkthrough of your space for each of these personas that were defined earlier. Then seek inspiration. Now that you know where maybe the liabilities and the opportunities are, go out and seek to learn about how other people handle these situations. And then you bring your team together and you meet to share data and your insights, and then you create an action plan to implement the 3 best and most accessible ideas. So if there's no action plan, then it's all a waste of time. So always have something in mind, some end goal that you're trying to get. Step 1, forming your design team. Try to keep it small. 3 to 5 team members is plenty adequate for this. Try to maximize diversity. It's not just your executive team. Try to pick people in different areas in terms of their age, their experience, what their jobs are, to get more ideas, a wider range of ideas. You can invite feedback from everyone on your staff, but try to keep the design decisions to your core team. And that takes me to cardinal rule number 1 when you're forming these teams. Don't ever discuss design decisions outside of the team meetings. You can talk about progress, but it's very important for your team to all be on the same page. If there's a concern, those team members need to bring it up to their team members, not to people who are on the periphery who don't have access to all the information the team has. That will kill this process and it will create more contention which is obviously not what we want. Okay, personas. This is essentially a marketing term for your typical user of your services. So the people that you're really trying to reach. So what you want to do is create, say, 5 of these, and be very specific about each one. One of them might be 18-year-old college freshman just discovered she's pregnant. Or maybe another one is a mother with 4 children who feels she can't handle a fifth. You also might want to do an advocate. Maybe it's a grandmother bringing in a granddaughter. But be very specific about their qualities and their characteristics and give them a name. Don't just say the grandma advocate, say Irene. And then people who understand the personas will understand everything that constitutes who this fictitious Irene person is. Then get yourself a floor plan. Doesn't have to be real fancy. The one on the left here was created by an architect. The one on the right is just a photograph of the egress diagram that's hanging by all the exit doors. It could be something that you have maybe a high school intern do who happens to have a drafting class and wants to try it out. So you just want to have something so that you can point to things on a map and say, this is what I'm talking about. This is where we have a pinch point. This is where we don't have enough room to do a particular act. Then gather your tools. Number 1, have a cell phone. Take pictures. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. Have a clipboard so you can take notes. Have the things that your persona might be carrying with them. Do they have a stroller because they've got more than one child? Do they need assistance getting around? What's it like for somebody with a disability to move through your space? So gather those things so that you can really get in character and try to empathize with what these people are going to see and feel and the challenges that they may run. Now that you've got your personas and you've got a floor plan in your hand and you've got your tools, it's time to do your walkthrough. You can do this individually or you can do it as a team. It'll take longer as a team, and what you want to do is experience the space through the eyes of that particular persona that you're evaluating. Think about all of the thresholds that they have to cross. I'll use an example of the first-time client who doesn't really know what your pregnancy care center is about. Go through each of these steps. Can they find the space? What's it look like from the curb? Can you see it from the street? What's it like to park? Is the front door very obvious? Think about all the chances that they have to kind of back out and say, I'm not comfortable here, turn around, and then you never even know they were in your pregnancy care center. But this little diagram that you're looking at is one that we did for a pregnancy care center to show all of these things, these decision points, before we can actually get them into a counseling room. Because once you've got them in there, then now you've got an open, receptive audience. There's a dialogue. But there's a lot of things that happen where you don't really have a lot of control or influence. This is where your building is delivering the message. Once you've completed your walkthrough and you've identified opportunities, challenges, maybe some liabilities, now it's time to go seek inspiration. It's time to get online and start looking up ideas that could help you with your messaging. Google, obviously, Pinterest, audiobooks. I mentioned there's a lot of research that's been done on environmental psychology and organizing spaces. Magazine articles. If you see something you like in a picture, just rip it out and bring it to the team. These days, we all have cameras on our cell phone. When you're out, even if it's just having dinner with friends and you see something that you really like the way it looks or it could work well in your pregnancy care center, take a picture of that and then bring it back in. Now you gather and discuss. Pull your team together and share with them your notes from your walkthrough and the inspirations you've pulled together. Very important here to value the diversity of opinion that you've created with your design team. You will eventually want to converge those ideas into an action plan, but keep your mind very open at this early stage. I mentioned the importance of diversity on your team earlier. One of the characteristics you want to look for are people who are convergent thinkers versus divergent thinkers, and you want them both on your team. Convergent thinkers, those tend to be executive types. They tend to be people who get things done very quickly, very efficiently. They strip away with a lot of distractions. They figure out things in a binary format. Whereas your divergent thinkers, they tend to be people who want to explore concepts from lots of different angles. In this process, you're going to start out really leaning on the divergent types to come to the table with lots of ideas. It's not to say that a convergent thinker can't also tap into that, but let's play to our strengths here. Here's how it plays out in an effective, efficient design process. Early on, you want that divergent thought process where you're trying to define what the problem is. You're trying to explore different opportunities. You're trying to research and bring things to the table. And then there's a period in this discussion where you need to start stripping away ideas, and that's what we call the convergent thinking. So as you're talking with your team, at some point, the leader of the team needs to recognize this and be able to say, all right, great. We've got all the ideas on the table. Now let's start combing through them and narrowing this down. That's how we arrive at the best possible solution without too much wandering. Then we come up with an action plan. One for each of these concepts that you want to explore. I mentioned earlier you want to try to come up with 3 things that are fairly easy to implement. You just define the plan. What is the need? What is it that you're going to overcome? How can that need be met? What's the method? What's it going to cost? Who can do it? You want to assign a name. It's not just a marketing person. It's Debbie can do it. And how soon can it be done? Let's put a timeline on it and make sure that it gets done. That's why they call it an action plan. It's focused on that. This is where the convergent thinkers really come in, because it's like, all right, we're going to get this thing done because this is what we agreed to. It's very clear. We don't have a lot of distractions. We've thoroughly vetted everything. Now we're going to get that sign put up in the lobby by Tuesday. Very specific. The more specific, the more likely it is to succeed. Okay, now that we understand some basic principles and have an outline of the process that we can use to apply those principles into our spaces, now I want to take us on a virtual walkthrough of typical spaces that we're going to find in pregnancy care centers. This way we'll be better able to recognize opportunities for us to imprint our image into the architecture. First, we begin off-site. How does your building present itself to the public? And this isn't just so that people can find it when they're looking for it. It's so that as they're driving by, subconsciously, they know it's there long before they ever think they're going to need their services, or a friend or a relative might need their services. So this is a good one in Bloomington, Indiana. It's a women's care center down there. It has great street presence. There's not some enormous billboard announcing what this building is. Instead, they've used signage, used their trademark rose color very effectively, so it projects itself without being obnoxious to the neighbors. It fits in very nicely, and therefore, it's very welcoming. It's a welcome addition to the community. On the flip side, here's the competition, right next door. What is this building? It kind of looks like a police station, maybe a bunker of some kind. It's not warm, it's not inviting, it doesn't welcome us into it. The trees are rather nice, but they're actually blocking the signage. So as people are going to and from this building, they probably don't recognize what's going on in here. It doesn't have much street presence. Here's another women's care center. This one was new construction. In fact, it was the first one that was built in South Bend. You can tell it has a very residential feel. This is not a clinic. It's not some commercial enterprise. This looks like somebody's home. It's very familiar to any American. It's not trying to be something more than it needs to be. Its beauty is somewhat in its familiarity. And the way that it's taken care of outside suggests the level of care that you can expect on the inside. Things are maintained, they're manicured, they care about the outside of this building, which should reflect what's going on the inside. Here's another pregnancy care center. This is the Alpha Center in Grand Rapids, and as you can see, it's quite a bit different than the one that we saw in South Bend. This is a grand building. It's almost like a mansion. And some people may say, oh, that's too much. We don't want people to be intimidated. But, if this is the asset that you have, then make the most of it. Say it is a mansion, and it's for you. Make people feel like they're welcome in this particular space. I mean, after all, Christ himself said that my Father's house has many rooms. So, it's not that it's a bad thing to have a beautiful, luxurious place for people to come and stay. Welcome them in if that's the asset that you have. Now we move to the parking lot. This is the first thing that people are going to see when they are committed to coming in to visit. And sometimes you get stuck in a bad situation, like this strip mall on the left. But the outdoors can always be improved with a little landscaping. Bushes and ornamental trees, they soften everything. And they can hide large swatches of pavement. A little verticality can hide a lot of horizontal pavement. Projects like these also can be good for volunteers. Like this little tree buffer that you see on the right-hand side. It's just some, boxwoods, a little bit of ornamental trees. If you can cut out a little section like that and have a work party, people can come in and plant these things, and then your parking lot can be much more inviting. You definitely want to avoid confusion in a parking lot. This picture on the top, they decided to repaint the lines, but they never erased the old ones. So you literally have 2 cars parking on 2 different systems. Signage. If you have signage in the parking lot, people trust signs. If they see one, they figure effort went into it. It must be telling me the right thing. So take a look at your signage and make sure that for a first-time viewer, it makes a lot of sense and it makes it easy for people to get into a parking space. If you're able to do this, reserving parking spaces for your guests is a great way to make them feel welcome and special. Take the questioning out of the parking lot experience. They know this is where I'm supposed to go, and you know that's where they're going to go too. So it can make it easier for people that might be coming with children, might be coming with elderly people. You know how they're going to see the building from the first time because you've given them the spot. Now, once we park our cars, this amazing metamorphosis happens. We transition from being a driver or a passenger to a pedestrian. And that means the psychology changes completely. Now we're very vulnerable. We're not protected from the elements. We don't want to have to cross through traffic if we don't have to. So think about that transition from being that pedestrian. How do we get them to the door as quickly as possible in a protected environment? Now let's approach the main entry. What is it that people see before they even get to your building? Again, picture on the left. This is not welcoming. Nobody wants to go into this building. What could we do to clean this up? A few elements can make a big difference. Just keeping things maintained, throwing a bench out there, having some greenery out there can make it a whole lot more inviting for somebody to approach that front door. Here are some very inviting entries, and you can see the impact that a little bit of landscaping can have. Just some potted plants, something that's easy to transition as the seasons change. Great opportunity for volunteers. Hey, just come in once a week, once a month, replace the plants with the season, deadhead them, pull out the dead stuff, we'll water them. What a great way to get more people involved. And it just sends that message that we care about this. We have people taking care of these plants every single day, just like we're going to have people taking care of you. Main entries are another great way to start introducing text messages, actual words, signage. The one on the right-hand side, this was at the Alpha Family Center in Lowell, and I love this because it's just a simple plaque that gives the house rules. This is how we operate. And it's not a list of do's and don'ts. I like the way that they do this. They basically say things like, we tell the truth. We value family. So as I'm hearing that, I'm thinking, great, they're not going to lie to me. But I'm also getting the message that I better not lie to them either because we're all in this together. I mean, what a great way to introduce your philosophy, your beliefs to people in a non-threatening manner. Here's a couple of lobby/waiting areas. Very simple. It's not overdone. Again, we don't have too many messages. We just have some very simple messages. The one on the left hand, very consistent with everything that you're going to see in that's again the Lowell Alpha Center. On the right hand side, you can see how some super graphics on the wall actually take a very tall space that's out of proportion and it shrinks it right down. And this doesn't cost a whole lot of money. What a great way to put your message on the wall and to bring scale down at the same time. Very clever. Now, if you had all the money in the world, what would your mission statement look like in your lobby? Well, here we have Microsoft on the left. Very clear. Not a lot to distract. Very easy to remember. A little bit of logo in the corner, but they're really emphasizing their message. We see something similar on the right-hand side. But there's something odd about this one, because I imagine when everybody looked at this, what they noticed was the clock on the wall. This is a perfect example of adding too much into what's in the space. The clock distracts from the mission. So be intentional and be aware of the things which might be kind of conflicting with that intentionality. Here's another image from the Alpha Center in Grand Rapids. Remember the big manor house that I showed you earlier? This is what they call their parlor, which is essentially a waiting room. But you can see that it fits the spirit of that particular building. There's consistency from outdoors to the indoors. Everything's very nicely appointed. I would call this upscale, but it's by no means snooty. It makes me feel more important to be here, or at least that people think I'm important enough to invite me into a room like this. Service corridors. Okay, once a person leaves the lobby, they're usually in a service corridor, and I have seen a lot of these that are essentially long passages of basically off-white colored paint. But this is an opportunity to, again, provide some level of messaging. You can see how this corridor, while it has glass on the wall, there's a message on here. This is an opportunity not just to fill space, but to reinforce some type of value that you're trying to express. Here's some other features that you could put in your service corridors. How about a list of success stories? People who were thrilled about the care that they received and want to promote what you're doing for them. If I were a new person, I would love to see this kind of testimonial on the wall. Or if you want it to be a little bit less formal, how about this collection of sticky notes that people can put up there if there's just some nice message that they want to give. What I like about this concept on the right is it's kind of messy, it's impromptu, kind of ad lib if you will, But that center message keeps it all framed so that it's not just a bunch of senseless clutter. We can see, oh, this is somewhere where we can give kudos to the people who are either working here or maybe clients that have come in. So the message is clear and it's organized. Counseling rooms. So I've seen a lot of counseling rooms, and generally they're all arranged pretty much the same. So I assume it works pretty well because everybody's been very consistent. But what I want to mention here is the backdrop behind the furnishings. Usually there's seats that are intended for the client, and then there's seats that are intended for the counselor. Think about what's on the wall behind the counselor, because that's the thing that the patient is going to be seeing, not necessarily the thing that's behind them. So the spaces, while the walls might all be painted the same, you want to think about what it is that people are looking at. So do this when you're doing through your walkthrough. Sit down and think in your mind, what is it that I'm looking at? If I'm not looking at the counselor, what am I looking at? Is it clutter? Is it a rack full of flyers that's too distracting? Is it some nice painting? Or is it one of our super graphics with our mission statement on it? Or is it just, a warm picture of like a mother holding her child? What is it that you want that person to be seeing? So exam rooms. These usually have a lot of equipment in them. This is an example which is obviously a chiropractor's office, but they looked at it from the standpoint of, look, when they're not lying face down on our table, they're sitting up. What are they looking at? What's behind the doctor? It's our mission statement, something that's very easy to read. Doesn't clutter up the room. One more opportunity to reinforce what the values are here in this place. Training rooms. Most of the pregnancy care centers I've been to have a training room. This is one where you can kind of deviate from the clutter a little bit because people are going to spend a lot of time in here, and and so having multiple messages is okay. This is one where we're getting that. We're getting value statements that are kind of surrounding this smartboard. But they're not distracting from the smartboard, right? Because it's been done very intentionally. When it's time to look at an image on there, we have it exactly centered in the room. It works out very well. But when we're not using that smartboard, we're subconsciously reinforcing our values to not only our clients, but as well as our staff, who will probably also be using this room. Here's another idea that came across at the Lowell Alpha Center. I like these little frames. Essentially, they have this kind of wood siding on the inside that you can't really see, but it kind of reinforces this shabby chic look that they've got going on. But these are actually bulletin boards. They just use dry erase markers, and they write announcements to the staff, or not staff, but the students right there on those boards. I thought that was very clever. It changes all the time. It kind of invites you to look at what the messages are, but yet it doesn't create clutter in the room. Child care rooms. This is another picture from the Women's Care Center in South Bend. It doesn't take much to define a space as one reserved for children, but one of the things that you see in here is it's not too many toys, right? You don't need a plethora of toys. You just need a few things to keep kids occupied for a little while. But it's very clean, which to a parent means it's very safe. I can see what my child's going to be doing in here. I'm not overwhelmed by a lot of different things that are happening. So don't overdo your child care rooms. So boutiques, stores, places where we provide supplies for young mothers or new mothers. Don't overdo them, right? You don't need to have, it doesn't need to look like Costco, right, with just pallets full of material, because as soon as your clients leave, you're going to restock it anyway. So keep these rooms small. This is actually another one in Grand Rapids where they have an enormous amount of inventory, and they have a big building, but their boutique isn't very big because it doesn't need to be. They take care of it. Everything is fully stocked, and once somebody takes something off the shelf, they just put another one in its place. At some point, your client is going to leave. So there's not typically a checkout or discharge area. Some pregnancy care centers may have something like that, but you should designate an area to do that. Where do you actually say goodbye? Because at that point on, now your building's the only thing that's speaking. You don't have a chance to speak to them. Is there a place designated where you're actually going to say goodbye to your client, hopefully just temporarily? And is there enough space to do that comfortably? Is it in a tight little doorway where there's people coming and going and it's uncomfortable and we're just trying to get them out, or they feel like they're being pushed out because they're in the way? And is there signage around there? What is the last message that you want to communicate to them before they walk back out into the lobby? A simple sign here that's not cluttered or distracted, that they can't miss, a sign on the back of the door, would be very helpful. Something that just reminds them we're here for you. What about when they're actually leaving the site? Commercial retailers know that this is still important, still a time to deliver a message. Here we have McDonald's, the king of all retailers, right? They don't say exit, they say thank you. They're giving a message. We're glad you came here today. We can do the same kind of thing. And it doesn't have to be expensive. I like this little chalk drawing, right? What if there was a different message every time a client came in and they left? Then they would know that you're intentional about it, right? Even state parks know this, right? That's this bottom left-hand one. Thanks for visiting. How about a little signage right there that reminds them? I mean, these little arrow signs are kind of fun because you can put anything on them. But just remind them, what is the last thing that you want them to think of before they leave that site, and you may never hear from them again. Okay, that was a little bit of a whirlwind. So we're going to take our green break here because I'm going to send you through another one. Because it's not just the clients that are receiving messages in your built space. It's also your staff. So we're going to transition to the staff side of things. And you could do this as a separate exercise if you like, create personas for who's in your staff. But let's walk through it from the areas which are basically staff only. Maybe a client goes back there occasionally, but how can we create a space where we're supporting our staff and reminding them of the values and reminding them that we appreciate what they're doing and how important their work is? So the staff side probably also has a corridor somewhere. Same principles apply. It could just be off-white paint, or there could be some message on there. Now this message is probably going to be a little bit different. Typically on your staff side, a retailer might say, our goal is to be more profitable, but you're not going to put that out there for the customers necessarily. And it's going to be the same kind of thing. It's not that you don't want them to see the message, but it just needs to be calibrated to the type of thing that you want your staff to see, to reinforce the work that they're doing as missionaries, essentially, as ministers to the people. Another thing every pregnancy care center should have is a history wall, typically on the staff side. This is somewhere where you can tell people about not only how far you've come, but where you're intending to go. It's a little bit of a scrapbook, and there's lots of ways to do that, so I've got a number of examples here. But you should be celebrating the progress that you're making. That last history wall was a bit formal. Here's one that's a little bit more of kind of a scrapbook quality. You got to figure out what fits with your style, with your type of facility, but find some way to explain to potential donors, to new staff, who is it? Who are you? Where did you come from? These history walls don't have to be expensive. This one looks pretty slick, but a lot of this is just how they painted the wall behind these boards. So we can be creative, but it's all intentional, right? It all fits together within the space. How about a donor wall? This is for an airline company showing their business partners, but you have partners as well. Probably some primary churches, maybe some businesses, individual donors. Why not put their name on a plaque and put it on the wall and just kind of celebrate them? On the flip side, you may have some people who think they're one of your primary donors, and when they walk by and see 12 names on the wall and theirs isn't on there, it kind of lets them know, hey, we appreciate everything that you're doing. These people are really giving a lot to what we're doing. They're a huge part of why we're successful. It's a way of kind of providing low pressure incentive that if people want to step up their partnership, there's kind of a way to do that. Okay, staff work areas. I could do a whole nother seminar on just calibrating workspace to fit the needs of the staff. But here I'm just going to focus on some of the messaging that you can put inside those workspaces. On the left-hand side, this is a rather comfortable lounge for volunteers and for some of the staff. The wall in the back has got a lot of different clutter on it. Everybody's got a bulletin board. You're going to have that. It's fantastic. It's fine. But what you can't see in here is one of those plaques actually gives the mission statement. And when you bury it inside of a wall like this, you're basically saying that that's as important as the potluck that we're going to have on Thursday. It would be better, like on the right-hand side, where that mission statement is on its own wall. It's distinct. There's nothing competing with it. So it's okay to have bulletin boards. Do that. Don't mix important messages in there that are less housekeeping. Celebrate your mission. Put it on a plaque. Put it on the wall. Give it its own dedicated space. Administration areas. Okay, this is actually the executive office at the Alternatives Center in Kalamazoo. And ignore the clutter on the couch. That was my mess. But what I love about this space is that the director, that's her desk, and guests can sit on the couch as I did. what's behind her is a message for her, right? It reminds her of what her duties are. It's kind of an inspirational quote. That's what she's looking at. That's her wall. What's behind what I'm looking at is something different. That should be where you want your staff to see a message that kind of reinforces what it is that you want them to be doing, or how you celebrate them, or the appreciation that you give to them. So again, this is kind of like the backdrops that we talked about in the counseling rooms. I should also point out that when I talked to the director, she didn't actually sit in that desk. She sat in a chair that's just off the picture here, which again communicated the message that we were equals, right? She wasn't speaking to me in her executive position. She was talking to me one-on-one. But again, she was looking at the sign that's behind my head in a more comfortable soft seating arrangement. So where you put your furnishings, directors, very important. So how do you celebrate your team's successes? I know that in many of these pregnancy care centers, you have got rough days. I mean, the fact is, sometimes they get away and you know something tragic is going to happen. So it's all the more important that when you have successes, you're putting them out there where they can be cataloged and recorded and celebrated. How can you do that? How can you show your staff their individuality and how everybody's contributing to this team? I like the picture in the upper right hand corner. This was kind of a staff directory, but instead of just doing headshots, everybody had to bring in a personal item. So you could instantly learn something about each one of the staff people just by looking at their picture, something about their personality. You can see that little sticky note thing on the bottom left, like we did in one of the service hallways. You could still do that same kind of thing. Kudos to workers. When you celebrate something, you had a great meeting with a client. You can put, the baby's name. Oh, she had twins. Jessica and Julie. You could put that on those little notes and let that thing evolve over time. There's this other one on the right-hand side. This was also in Lowell. Each one of their core staff members had a little plaque on there, and there was a little bit of a write-up on each one of them. So celebrate your staff. Let them know that as individuals, they're extremely important, and do it in a way that they realize that they're still a team, that all those little individual efforts contribute to the bigger success of the PCC. This is a volunteer space. Again, we're back in Grand Rapids at the Alpha Center. A couple of things I really love about this space. First of all, it's very clean. It's organized. There's not too much. I like the size of it. Normally, I would say that this is out of scale, but there are times when there's a lot of people milling around in here, and the temptation would be to put a table in the middle to fill this space, but then it becomes crowded. When you have 6 or 7 people in this room, it's going to get small very fast. And if you put a table in there, I promise it's just going to collect clutter. And in fact, they told me that same thing. They said, we took that out. And so now they have a better space, which when there's nobody in there, it kind of looks empty. You put 2 or 3 bodies in there, it doesn't feel empty anymore, and the scale works out very well. Prayer corners and chapels. I've been into PCCs that do not have one of these, or at least they don't have a very good one. You need to have a good one. Like I said at the beginning, you are on the front lines of a fierce spiritual war. We're battling for people's souls here. You need to keep your ammunition stocked. Don't neglect the spiritual needs of your soldiers. Otherwise, you're going to send them out on the battlefield unarmed. Give them a place where they can rejuvenate, where they can spend time in prayer and meditation. And it doesn't have to be very expensive. This one on the left this is actually a chapel. They literally are able to say Mass in here because they have a lot of Catholic workers in this particular building. This one on the right is more of a meditation room. It's kind of more of a general purpose space. Kind of too small to be an office. It's the perfect size for a person to go in there and close the door and just spend some time, however they need to kind of recharge their spiritual batteries. Here's some other examples of some little prayer corners or chapels. If you don't have a lot of space, it's okay. I love this one on the left-hand side. It was literally underneath the stairway in a building. The one in the middle. What did they do here? They just provided some veils. So you can see if somebody's in there, but if they've got the veils closed, then you know I should be quiet if I'm in this particular space. They need a little alone time. Window seat, great spot. How about filling that bottom rack with some inspirational books, a Bible, whatever you need to give people what they want, or what helps them get recentered and reconnected with their God before they go back out onto the battlefront, really. So that's a really rapid tour of some ideas that you can employ in your own pregnancy care centers, both on the client side and the staff side. Tried to throw out a lot of ideas in there, but obviously can't cover them all. but hopefully you were inspired by looking at some of those images. Just got a couple more slides here just to kind of wrap up a little bit of review as we kind of close this session. So when coming up with new solutions for your environmental messaging, just keep in mind that less is more. Don't overdo it. Don't try to implement too many ideas at one time. Just be very intentional about the things that you do want to implement. For some of your ideas, you might want to do some fundraising. So, quick note about that. A very effective way to do fundraising is to give people a vision. Share with them graphically what it is that you're trying to raise money to do. This is a little board that we put together for a fundraiser for the alternatives in Kalamazoo. And what we were showing is, what does the counseling room look like now? We listed out all of the liabilities, all of the problems that they were facing that was hampering their ability to provide their services. And then we gave them some images of what we were raising money for. And we literally put dollar values. It's easier to ask somebody to donate $250 for this one particular chair than it is to say, we're raising $8,000, can you contribute $250? People want to be able to say, yes, they have that in there because I gave some money. It's easier to buy a thing than it is to buy a concept. Now, when you're creating visioning images, don't think that you have to create the exact replica of what it is that you're raising money for. You're still just trying to help people share in the vision. This is a textbook case. So here we have a church on the upper left-hand corner, which was a terrible place to be worshiping God. But that's what they were doing in here. And everybody said, oh, it's too low, the ceiling's too low, it's too squat, looks like a bingo hall, we're not really going to get anything better out of this. So we did a quick rendering and said, well, maybe it is squat, but we could improve it. And based on that rendering, a fundraising campaign was raised, and they basically got more money than they needed to complete that particular phase of the project. Now, what's down below was what actually got built. You can see that it's significantly different, but in concept form, it's the same. And you should do the same thing when you're rolling out visioning images. Don't be a slave to the idea that it has to look exactly like what we told people. It just needs to be the same in concept. All right, so to wrap up, your building is speaking. So you should control its message. Make sure it's telling your clients and your staff the things you want them to be hearing. Simplify, declutter, coordinate your space, and then saturate it with your message. Use words sometimes to communicate that message, but use the environment all the time. Everything that's in your space should be there for a particular reason, and it should be supporting your mission. Start with the low-hanging fruit. Don't try to bite off more than you can chew. If you do this exercise with the action plan, focus on the things that are easiest to do. Make incremental steps. And I didn't really cover this in great detail, but if you've got a major initiative, bring in professionals to launch them. I've kind of just barely scratched the surface of what the potential is for doing environmental branding. But again, the idea was to try to hit it with the low-hanging fruit, the stuff that you can do kind of on your own. But if you really want to do it right, this is kind of a self-plug, but look for your local interior designers and your local architects and your local graphic designers and bring them in as partners and learn from them and let them help you take your environmental messaging to the next level. So that's it. I hope you found this workshop useful. I hope that you'll use the worksheet and go through a little walkthrough of your own space. Before I go, I do want to put in another plug for Life Matters Worldwide. Their summit in 2020 is coming up May 14th and 15th, and they have dozens of workshops that cover all kinds of topics that pregnancy care centers care most about. So look into that, circle it on your calendar, and I hope to see you there.